Today we are talking about dotted eighth notes and dotted eighth rests. In 4, if we were in 4/4, a dotted eighth note would get 3/4 of a beat. The eighth note gets half a beat, and the dot adds half of what came before it. So the dot would get half of a half, which is a fourth, meaning we'd get 3/4 of a beat. If we're in 8, the eighth note gets 1 count, and the dot gets half. So we'd get a total of 1.5 counts in 8. Let's do some rhythm math examples. We've got a 16th note plus something equals a dotted eighth note. We know that the dotted eighth note is equal to 3 16th notes. An eighth note plus half is a 16th note, or 3 16th notes. So what's missing here is an eighth note. In this example, we have a dotted eighth plus a dotted eighth. We know that the dotted eighth is equal to 3/4 of a beat if we were in 4/4. So 3/4 plus 3/4 is 1.5. And what would get 1.5 beats in 4/4? The dotted quarter. Let's learn how to count dotted eighth notes. Like every note, we start a dotted quarter note in a measure with the count 1. Now we do not need a line here. I'm going to put one to kind of show an example of how this works. We need to think about the dotted eighth note compared to our 16th notes here in 4. So dotted eighth note is going to be equal to 3 16th notes. So it's kind of like we could put E and on the line, and that's going to leave a left over. So I could also just write this 1 a. Here's our quarter note, which is 2. And then we've got a 16th note on the beat. So we're going to write a 3 there. Then the dotted eighth starts on the second quarter of beat 3. So we're going to call that E. Again, we don't need to put a line, but I'm going to use it to show an example. This dotted eighth is equal to 3 16th notes. So we've got E and then and on the line. Or we could just write 3 E. So if the dotted eighth starts the beat followed by a 16th note, we're going to get 1 If a 16th note starts the beat followed by a dotted eighth, we've got 3 E. Here's an example that has dotted eighth notes in 6/8. So this dotted eighth starts the measure, it gets 1. And since a dotted eighth gets a count and a half in 6/8, we're going to start the second count. This 16th note is half, so it's just going to get and. It's the second half of the second count. And then we've got an eighth note on our third count. Then we've got a 16th note to start count 4. And that means that this dotted eighth starts on the second half of the fourth count. So we're going to write and. Since it's longer than 1 count, we're going to draw a line, and then we put the next whole count on the line. So we've got all of count 5 here, plus the second half of count 4. And then this eighth note is the 6th count. Dotted eighth rests work similar to dotted eighth notes. If we were in 4, the eighth rest would get half a count, and the dot would add half of that, meaning that the dotted eighth rest gets 3/4 of a count. If we're in 8, like 6/8, the eighth rest would get 1 count, and the dot would add half of that, or half a count, meaning that the dotted eighth rest would get 1.5 counts. Let's do some more rhythm math examples. Here we've got an eighth rest plus a 16th rest. That is our formula for a dotted eighth rest. An eighth rest, if we were in 8, gets 1 count. The 16th rest gets half. 1.5 counts a rest in 8 would be our dotted eighth rest. Here we've got a dotted eighth rest plus a 16th rest. The dotted eighth rest gets 3/4 of a count in 4, and the 16th rest gets 1/4 of a rest. 3/4 plus 1/4 is 1 whole count a rest, which is a quarter rest in 4. Let's learn how to count dotted eighth rests. In 4, we're starting this example with a quarter note on beat 1. The dotted eighth rest starts on beat 2 and takes up 3/4 of that beat. I can write the E and to kind of get us to that third, get those 3/4 all taken care of. That leaves the 16th note as a. But this dotted eighth rest is a rest, so it goes in parentheses. We could also write this as 2 in parentheses by itself, and then just a afterwards. Our eighth notes are 3 and. This 16th note starts beat 4, and this dotted eighth rest starts on the second quarter, which is E. We could draw a line and put and on there as well, signifying the 3/4 of a beat that the dotted eighth rest contains. We put it in parentheses because it's a rest. Otherwise, we could just write 4 with E in parentheses. Let's learn how to count some dotted eighth notes in 8. This eighth note starts the measure, it gets a 1. The 16th note gets half of count 2, but we write the beat it starts on, so that's our 2. This dotted eighth rest starts on the second half of beat 2. Draw a line, and it's going to continue and use all of beat 3. So 2 and 3 there. 2 16th notes here for 4 and. This dotted eighth starts beat 5. We draw a line, and it continues into beat 6, and this 16th note is the end of beat 6. Let's review. Dotted eighth notes and dotted eighth rests get 3/4 of a count in 4 and 1.5 counts in 8. In 4, if they start a beat, you give it the number, and the 16th note to follow will be a. Or if they don't start on the beat and a 16th note starts on the beat, we give that a count, and the dotted eighth note gets an E. Here the dotted eighth gets a count and a half. This 16th note gets the second half of the second count. Eighth note gets all of count 3. This eighth note gets all of count 4. This 16th note gets the first half of the fifth count, and this dotted eighth starts on the second half of the fifth count and goes all the way through the sixth count. Thanks for watching.